Hello, welcome back to Today in the Word. We're so glad that you've joined us for our regular author interview. Today we are talking to the author of the April Devotional called The Heart of Worship, a Study in Leviticus. And I have Dr. Ryan Cookl. Welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Yes. So Ryan teaches in our school at Moody. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, so I'm a professor of Old Testament and Hebrew at Moody Theological Seminary. So I teach mostly Hebrew and Old Testament.
Very good. So perfect for this month's study. We are in the book of Leviticus, and I love in the introduction that you say a little bit about how people feel when they get to Leviticus.
Yeah, I've had so many people tell me their experience of reading through the Bible in a year. And they'll say, I was doing great. It was so interesting through Genesis, and we read about the Exodus from Egypt, and then I got to Leviticus, and I couldn't make it through.
You get stuck.
So it's one of those books that just seems so foreign to readers today that they're not sure what to do with it, and then it becomes hard to be motivated to keep making it, keep plowing through.
Give us a little information on what's in Leviticus and where it is in the Bible.
Yeah, so a good way to think about Leviticus is most people are familiar with the Exodus from Egypt, right? Moses and the 10 plagues, and Israel goes to Mount Sinai. What most people forget about is the fact that Israel was at Mount Sinai, at the foot of Mount Sinai for a year.
Wow.
And it's during that year that the book of Leviticus is set in.
Okay.
And that's when God gave that revelation to Moses during that year at Mount Sinai. And the book of Leviticus is really all about answering the question of how can a sinful people have a holy God dwell in their midst? How can God dwell in the midst of a sinful people? And how's that dynamic going to work? And Leviticus itself, if you think about the book as a whole, can be split up into two parts.
Okay.
So the first part, chapters 1 to 16, that's mainly directed at the priests. So it's like, what kind of sacrifices should we give? How do we give them? How do you be ordained as a priest? Who can come and worship? How do you distinguish between clean and unclean and holy and profane? And then the second half of the book, chapter 17 to 27, is really aimed at the whole community. So how does the average Israelite person, how can they be involved in protecting the holiness of God, and how can they live a holy life, a life that's pleasing to God as well?
Interesting. Well, that gives us a framework. I think it's helpful to approach it that way, to say that this was really a guidebook, a way that people were living in, a way that people were approaching God in worship.
Yeah, and so in a lot of ways, it's really a gift. When you look at a lot of cultures around Israel, one of the things that people struggled with was, well, what does God want? We don't know what the gods want. How are we supposed to worship them? Leviticus is really clear. This is how God wants Israel to worship him. That's
true. Even in the very early parts of the Old Testament in Genesis, you see God instructing, how people are to sacrifice in small ways. And then here it comes in with a very detailed explanation.
Right. And there's, several different kinds of sacrifices. And so it becomes very clear, like what all goes into, sacrificial worship.
And you've put together a teaching tool for us, which we'll be sharing with all of you. You can find it on our website. It's a chart of the sacrifices, so that will help you, and you can print it out, and it will help keep things organized in your mind. Because I do think there can be some intimidation to studying a book like this, but I also think it's so worthwhile, and it impacted my own heart as I read it, and I realized how holy God is, and the weight of our sin. It impressed heavily on my mind.
Yeah, the sin is costly, right? And we often don't think about that when sometimes we just pray for forgiveness. We take that, in a sense, for granted, that we can just pray to God and be forgiven for our sin because of what Christ has done.
Right.
But Israel would have been reminded every day of the cost of sacrifice. And I like to envision, a family coming to worship at the tabernacle with their kids in tow, and they're bringing their animal that they had raised, with them, and laying their hands on the head of the animal, and it being inspected by the priest and sacrificed and offered for the atonement of their sin. And just how vivid that experience would make the the cost of forgiveness and the cost of sin would be, at the forefront of their mind.
Very good. Well, thank you. I know we're all looking forward to this, and I hope you will stick with us because we are going to get you through the book of Leviticus. What can people expect to take away from this month's study?
Yeah, a number of things, I hope. One is, there's so many different kinds of sacrifices. And one of the benefits of that is it helps us to see, if you think of Jesus being the fulfillment of the sacrificial system, it helps you see different elements of what the death of Christ meant. So there's a lot of different facets to that. And each of those sacrifices contributes to our understanding of what it meant for Christ to die on the cross and raise again. So one of my prayers is that you'll get to know Jesus better and to appreciate more of what he accomplished for us on the cross. I think the second takeaway would be to realize that our worship of God involves our whole life. So Leviticus involves not just worship at the tabernacle, but it's what you wear and what you eat and how you relate to foreigners and resident aliens and members of your household, and love your neighbor is one of the commands in Leviticus. And so it's just a good reminder that our worship of God involves all of life and all of our relationships, and everything that we do, our work, is all a part of that. And so I hope that really hits home.
Yeah, I think it will. And we really appreciate your work on this. And we hope you will all join us. So go to our website if you haven't already, or download our app. And if you like these videos, we hope you will hit like and subscribe, which helps share this as well. Thank you.